All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Akshay Birla. I'm the VP over our Public Health and Healthcare division here at Juvare. Excited to have you on for our third office hours this quarter. Margot is going to be walking you through filters and dashboards, and we'll just answer your questions. So without further ado, Margot, take it away.
Dashboard. And as for those of you guys that have been here on these before, here's some information about Elaine and I, who are both on the call with you today. Elaine does also cheer for the Green Bay Packers, as I think most of the people on the call know, so she just doesn't have that at the bottom of hers. I figured that was important enough to throw on mine, but you know. She's the person who she's like, call me anytime unless if there's a game on. So it's always an important time of the year for her. For our agenda today, obviously we kind of just covered the introduction. If you want to go back and watch that later and actually read what it says, you'll have the opportunity to do that because Akshay will send out a link to the recording. Today we're going to talk about filters and we're going to talk about dashboards. So we're going to go through the basics of creating a filter, adding and ordering columns in a filter, updating a filter that you've saved. Then we'll talk about creating a dashboard. We did talk about that already in our first section, but we're going to come back and just revisit it a little bit because of the fact that gadgets can be customized using those filters. So the results that you get in the gadgets on a dashboard can be based upon the filter that you're using for that particular gadget. The columns that you see, the data that you get is all based upon the filter that gadget is configured for. And then at the end, hopefully for today, I won't actually run until we're 5 minutes over, and you guys will have an opportunity to ask any questions that you have. And if you guys have got questions, want to talk amongst yourselves, you're welcome to go ahead and do that at that point. If you do have questions as we move throughout here, please feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask questions, but I always put that Q&A session at the end just in case anybody's thinking back through and goes, oh, I forgot to ask this and I meant to ask it. And that way we can go ahead and take care of any questions that you guys have. Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump right in here, and we're going to talk about filters. Filters have multiple purposes within EMTrack. So I know a lot of you guys are probably familiar with filters when you're going and just searching for a specific patient or a grouping of patients. And that can be used to establish that search criteria. Like, hey, I'm looking for all my red patients. I'm looking for all the patients associated with a specific incident. However, those filters can also be used to determine what your dashboard gadget results are. So in other words, is a gadget going to show all your red patients, all your yellow patients, all your patients that are en route to a destination, all your patients that are at a facility, things like that. And they're also used, again, to identify the data displayed. So do you display the tracking number? Do you display the age? What information is actually displayed either directly on that dashboard gadget or when you drill down into the patients that are part of that dashboard gadget when you're talking about a summary gadget? They can be configured at the division level or at the user level. So again, as a state administrator, you can actually configure them so that they are available across the division. You can also create your own personal filters. So if you say, this is something that I use just for me, nobody else really needs it, it's just a query that I do periodically or a search that I do, you can save that just for yourself, or you can create one that's for the division where other regional administrators in the division can see that and play around with that filter. It can also be shared just like the dashboards. You can also share that filter with others based upon their role, based upon their division type, or a specific division. So you can share it with other regional administrators. You can share it with hospital administrators. You can share it with all the folks at Mercy Metro. You can share it with all the EMS folks, things like that. So you have that same configurability and ability to share that filter. Now, when you share a filter with others, if you're sharing it with a role who does not have the ability to edit them, you'll be able to go ahead and they can at least see it, they can make a copy of it, and they can personalize that if they want to. So they'll be able to, your users, your lower level, your ED normal users, your EMS standard users are able to go ahead and view what you've set up as a filter, and they're able to go ahead and then copy that and customize it for themselves if they wanted to for a personal dashboard use for them. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into the demo here. One of these days I'll learn the easy way to do this. We'll do this. Pause that. And here we go. So obviously I'm sitting in a training environment. This is a regional administrator user, so similar to your access. And I'm going to go ahead and go over to the Filters tab. Now, as we talked about before, filters can be used just to find patients. Now, if I don't add any search terms, I can just hit search. I get all the patients. If I say, you know what, I really only want to get my red patients, I can come in here and I can say, you know what, I want to filter it by a triage category of red. Then when I search, you notice I'll only see my red patients. Now, this is great, right? I can use this, I can filter it, I can find it. For those of you that maybe like to do reports, I can either select specific people, and under views, for those of you who are learning EMTrack a little bit, whenever you see views, it really means reports. I've learned not to ask why. I've just adjusted to it. I asked why back in the beginning, and they said it just is, and I've just learned to adjust to it. So if you're looking to run reports maybe on a handful of patients, you can do that here. You can run a history report. The custom report is the one that I tell people. I'm going to tell you probably 99% of the time, that custom report is the one that I'm going to run, because that allows me to select the fields that I want included, and it goes over into an Excel compatible format. The detail report is a PDF file that's going to give all the information on the patient or patients that you've selected to run that report on. So just so that you know that views really means reports, it's not going to change anything that you see here. It's going to run that report. You also, on the filters page, also have that opportunity to do some additional actions. So maybe you want to discharge a bunch of people at once, or you want to delete a bunch of training users, training patients that you've got. You can do that. You can receive a group of patients, so you can bulk select people and receive everybody into a particular facility or location. And you can also bulk transport. So those are additional functionalities that you have on the Filters tab that you can use. Now, back into the search functionality, right? So now we're looking here, and by default, it's going to give us these columns here. So we're going to have the age, the gender, the provider evaluation, which you'll notice is the triage category plus the chief complaint, and then the tracking summary. So where are they? Are they being transported? Are they at a current location? Are they at an incident site? Things like that. So this gives you a pretty general idea, and you're like, yeah, that's really great, but what if I'm looking for people that might be in different incidents and I want to know what incident they're a part of? I can come in here and I can go ahead and say, hey, you know what? I want to add some columns into here. So I'm going to say I want to add the tracking number, and I'm going to say I want to add the incident, and I want to add the ETA so that if anybody is actually in the process of being transported, I can tell when they're going to come in, and I can kind of see that happen. Like, okay, that's great. I like this, but what if I don't like the order that these results are in? If I go, you know, I really like this filter. I'm going to use this because obviously red patients are really important to me, but I want to see this in a different order. You know what? I want to know what their tracking number is. You can grab these columns and move them around. So I'm going to say I think tracking number is really important to me. I think their ETA is really important. I want to know their age, their gender is good, provider evaluation, so on and so forth. Other than that, I think this order is good for me. So now I have this set up the way I want it. I'm going to go ahead and click Save. You'll notice it's going to come up and prompt me to give it a name. And I'm going to say red patients with tracking and ETA. And that's the name that I'm going to give it. So I can come in here. Now this is, remember I talked about this, where you can have this be a divisional filter, or it can be a personal filter. So if this is just a search that you want to run for yourself and nobody else is going to need to do it, you can make that personal and you don't have to worry about it at all. If it's something that you say, you know what, some of the other regional administrators might want to look at it, they might want to make changes to it. This is just my, hey, this is my initial thought. They might want to customize it even further and have that apply across the division. You can go ahead and let that owner be the division. So I'm going to go ahead and have that be the division. And we talked about being able to share. So again, you can share by the role, by the division type, or by the division. So if I was to do it by role, I could come in here and say, yep, I want to share this with regional administrators. Now granted, regional administrators, because it's a divisional filter, are already going to be able to see it. But maybe I say, you know what, I actually want to share it with a provider facility. I can do that. I can say I want to share it with all of the ED admins at provider facilities, and that's going to be your hospital. I'm going to say, you know, I think that's kind of an important one for them. And I also think that my mobile providers, my field EMS folks, or let's say my EMS administrators, they're a good one. They need to be able to see and maybe copy and customize this filter. Again, this is just saying I'm letting them see it. It's not saying, hey, you can change things. Other regional administrators will be able to change it because that owner is the division of Y training, which is that region that I'm in. But any of these ED admins and EMS providers, they'll be able to see it, but they will not be able to make changes to it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And you can see now it says my save is successful, and up here at the top, instead of saying that it's a new search, it says red patients with tracking and ETA, and that the owner is Y training. Now if I had selected it as a personal, it would show that Ronald Weasley was the owner. So you've got that all in there. Now let's say I go to my dashboard and I'm looking at things at my dashboard and I go, you know what, I think I really want to make a change to that filter, right? Because it happens. Once we start playing around with things, we create it, we save it, we need to make changes. You can come over to the Filters tab and you have a Find Filters link here. And you can go ahead and click Find Filters and you'll see my filters. I have Red and Transport, and that one is owned by Ronald Weasley. So that's a previous filter that I created that's a personal filter. I can look at the Y training ones, which is where this one is owned. And let's see, what did I call it? I don't remember what I called it. We'll see here. We'll go down to all. Sometimes things show up in the all that don't show up in the every. There we go. There's my red patients with tracking and ETA, and you can see that the owner is Y training. And I'll tell you, the really nice thing is that when you go down to all, you can see everything, whether it's my filters or belonging to the division, which is a regional administrator can come in really handy because then you can see everything. You'll notice this is one that was created by another user who is a regional administrator who has shared it. So I can see that one. The same thing, here's that Red in Transport with Destination that Ronald Weasley owns. That one has been shared. That's why I can see it here. So just keep that in mind that you do see ones from other folks in here. So I'm going to go ahead, let me go back over to page 2 here, and I'm going to select that red patients with tracking and ETA. And remember we said, oh, you know what, we might want to change this up a little bit. So we can come in here, go to the columns, and we're going to say, you know what, we want to go ahead and let's include their EMR number. So we want to go ahead and throw that in there. And we're going to go ahead and even though the destination location is in here, I'm going to identify it separately, and I'm going to do that because I want you guys to see what happens here. So I'm going to go ahead and add those, and then I'm going to hit search. And you'll notice whereby in the tracking summary, remember I said some of these are combinations. So the provider evaluation is a combination of fields. The tracking summary is also a combination of fields. You can see if I expand this, it gives us the transporting, which is their current state, where they're being transported to, so that's that Mercy Metropolitan, and it also gives us the unit that's currently transporting them. So we have all of that information all in one. And again, because that's a destination location, we're going to see that over here, but we're not going to see it for the patient who is at Cincinnati Children's because that patient is not being transported. They do not have a destination location. They've already arrived at their destination. In this case, none of them have an EMR number, but I'm going to say, you know what, I think that one's kind of important to keep, so I'm going to move that one over here. And you know, I don't really need that destination location because I have that here, so I can come back here into the columns. I can remove that, And then all I have to do is hit save. You'll notice I get that exact same prompt. Is this personal? Is this not? Do I want to change the name? Do I need to share it with anyone else? I'm going to say, nope, everything else is selected. Good. I'm going to go ahead and click save. And you'll notice my save is successful. If I come back over here to the dashboard, I go back over to my filters tab, you'll see I'm back on that new search. I can go ahead and hit find filters, and I'm going to go ahead and just go down to all because we know that it's in here. And there's our red patients with tracking and ETA. And you'll see as soon as I pull that up, it automatically loads it up here. It's going to give me the owner. When I hit search, I'm automatically going to get all of those columns I requested in the order that I requested them. So you've got that information in there. It's all there. It's all going to be saved, the location, the order, the whole 9 yards. And I must not, I thought I had dragged that over, but I didn't. So let me get that over here and click save so we've got that in the right place there. Now we've got it. There we go. So this gives you the ability to say, hey, you know what? Every time I do a search, I don't have to start from scratch. I don't have to say, I want this information and I'm looking for patients that meet this criteria, things like that. Now, you'll notice we can add more search terms. So if I come in here, let's say I want to say that I'm looking for folks with a destination location of, we'll say Summit Hospital. So we're adding criteria. Everything that I put on one page is an and when you're doing a search, just so that you know this. If I add multiple search terms or multiple criteria to a filter, that is an and. So right now I'm looking for patients who have a triage category of red and have a destination location of Summit Hospital. So you'll notice if I hit my search now, I only get one result because I only have one patient who is currently being transported to Summit Hospital. So I want to point that out to you, and let me point that out again. We can add multiple terms here, and again, I can add enough that it may actually completely remove all of my patients in here. So I added an incident type, an incident location type, and you can see now I've gone from one user down to none. So I can come back in here and say, you know what, I'm going to change this and say I want folks that are at a facility and not at an incident type, and I'm going to remove that Summit Hospital requirement. So now I'm looking for people who are being transported to a provider facility. So I'm going to go ahead and hit search on that, and we've got a question here. Do hospitals manually add the EMR? So hospital users, or in this case, so there's actually an EMR and there is an EPCR option. So we have the option for both the EMS personnel to add their number on there, and then on the hospital side, yes, they would be the ones that would add the EMR number. So there isn't a connection that's going to make that automatically. It is something that has to be manually entered. But it can be really useful because then the hospital can say, oh, we've got all that EMTrack information. If you add that EMR number in there, now if you're looking in the EMR system or the EHR system and you're like, hey, what is this, or what happened to this patient, where did they come from? You can turn around and look in EMTrack, get any of that data from EMTrack that you have, and then obviously you can do a visual of both of the information in both. The other place where that comes in handy, and we discovered this when we were implementing Clark County, Nevada, following the shooting that they had there, the concert shooting. And what they informed us of, which we hadn't realized previously, was that for some hospitals, their EMR or EHR systems actually have restrictions in place. So that if someone is brought in that has no identification and can't speak and can't give them any information, they don't have a way to enter, in essence, an unconscious Jane Doe with no identifiers. So they actually had to resort, for some of their hospitals, had to resort to actually maintaining the data on paper. And so part of their purpose in their after action report, where they chose to implement EMTrack, is because it actually allows them to track that patient. All they need to have is an ID that they can put on the patient, And then they can track all that, any medications they've given, things they've done, take notes on that patient, and have that information until they get enough information to get that person entered into their EMR system. So it's just another scenario where EMTrack can be used in that type of mass, mass casualty type of incident where maybe you are getting those patients that you can't enter into the EMR system, which, again, that was something that they didn't realize was going to be a problem for them until it actually happened. So that's just something to be aware of for everybody. So anyway, back to where we were. So you can see we've got this ordered, we've got this re-entered. And again, you do have all these columns in here. If we didn't want to include things like the age or the gender, we can deselect them here. And then all of a sudden they don't show up. So that's an automatic thing. We can add them in. If we put them back, they're going to go back to the exact same spot. So that's filters in a nutshell. I do want to point out one other thing for you guys, because this is one thing that I find a lot of people don't happen to catch along the way when they're doing searches. If you are searching for patients who are part of an incident that has been completed, so the incident, you guys, maybe it was an exercise, maybe it was a real incident, it's ended, you've ended the incident, all the patients have therefore been automatically archived, or maybe it was a training situation and you deleted them, but now you want to go back and actually search for them. By default, EMTrack is only going to search for active patients. So it is not going to search for patients who have been archived because they're part of an incident that has been ended or completed, and it's also not going to search for patients who have been deleted by default. Again, this is logical. We don't want to give you a ton of patients to pick from. We want to make sure that you're looking at the active ones first and that you are deliberately choosing if you want to search for archived patients. So if I wanted to do that, I could come in here and say I wanted to look at archived patients, and you'll notice when I hit search now, my list is significantly longer. I now have 44 results of red patients. And you can see now there's some additional information in there. Folks entered some EMR numbers. We've got, a variety of information in here now, and you can see a number of different incidents. So I just want to point out to you that that does exist. Now, if I do that and I come back over here to the dashboard and return to the filters page, or obviously any other page, if I were to go to a new search, anything like that, it is automatically going to go back to just searching for active patients. So just keep that in mind, that by default, it's only going to give you active clients. If you are searching for patients who are part of an incident that maybe you had an exercise last year, an incident last year, that you want to search for and say, hey, I'm just looking to acquire some data. We had a marathon last year, and how many patients did we end up having? How many red patients did we have? How many yellows? Whatever the case may be. You do need to go through and select that archived field, because that will go ahead and allow you to search for those patients who have been archived. So now that we've talked about filters, we're going to go ahead and flip back over to the presentation. Let's see if I can get this going again here. And we're going to talk about dashboards. I've kind of thrown in the word dashboard here multiple times as we're looking at the filters. But now I want to go ahead and actually talk about dashboards. And for those of you that were here for session 1, this slide is going to look really, really familiar because it's exactly the same. Like I said, we already talked about dashboards. We already talked about configuring dashboards. But I wanted to go ahead and kind of lead into the dashboard configuration with this one, again, because it is the same, and it is applicable still. And I want to point out some of those similarities. So obviously, dashboards use the configurable gadgets. One of those configurations is the filter that gadget is based upon. So that is one of those configurations that you can see. Dashboard gadgets, again, can be division-wide, divisional, or incident-specific data. They can be configured similar to the filters at the division level or at that personal or user level. And they can also be shared with others based upon the role, division type, or specific division. So just like we talked about before, I didn't change this at all. I just want to kind of bring that back up and refresh your memory on that. Dashboard gadgets. When we talked about dashboard gadgets, when we did the first one, we focused on all of them. So we looked at all of the different types of gadgets, what they look like, and what we do. This time around, we're going to focus on the client list and the client summary, because those are the two that are going to be affected by these filters. So you're going to see that in there that you can make changes to them, and they are going to alter the results of your gadget. So I just want to point out to that and make sure that you guys are aware of that. So obviously the active incidents in the region, which is this one here, you're not going to see any changes in that one. Active incidents for the division, same thing. That is not going to have any effect. It doesn't give you any patient information. But that client list and client summary definitely give you that filter information. So from there, if nobody's got any questions, I'm going to go ahead and roll back over into EMTrack. And we're going to go over to the dashboard page. So on the dashboard page here, you can see I'm on this standard page that we looked at. This is the dashboard that we created in Office Hours 1. So I've got one of every kind in here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to create a new dashboard. So I'm going to say add a division dashboard, and it's going to let me add a new gadget. And I'm going to go ahead and say I want to add a client list. And I want this client list to be based upon that new filter that I just created and saved. So red patients with tracking and ETA. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in here. You'll notice we have that enable incident mode. What does that do? That goes ahead and lets me say, you know what, when I turn incident mode on, I want you to only show me the patients in this gadget that apply to the incident that I've selected. So that's what that incident mode button is. You'll notice I also have the option to view this filter or to create a new one. I'm going to go ahead and just hit apply here because I want to show you what happens. So remember all of our columns that we had? You'll notice they're all in here. So the filter configuration that I created when I created this red patients with tracking and ETA, you'll notice that's also the title to the gadget. Everything that I get in here is based upon the configuration of that filter. So you can see I've got the tracking number, the EMR number, the ETA, the age, gender, all of those options that I selected, and you'll notice it's only showing me my red patients. Now, if I take this, let me go ahead and just save this. So we don't lose that. So if I come back over here to my filters tab and I go to find filters, and I'm just going to go to all because it's easier, and we pull up that red patients with tracking and ETA and I hit search. And I come in here and I say, you know what? I don't think I really need to know what their gender is or what their EMR number is. I can come in here, I can pull that EMR number off, pull that gender off. I'm going to save my changes. So you can see I saved my changes. Now I've got tracking number, ETA, age, provider eval, and then in incident. When I come back to the dashboard, you'll notice that that gadget has updated with what I changed that filter to. So I've only got those columns that I selected to be included in the filter. So again, this is that portion where what you set in your filter makes a difference in what's going to show up on your dashboard. If I were to add additional filters into that filter, into that red patients with tracking and ETA, if I added an additional requirement like only patients who are transported, that would drop off this patient here because they're at a facility, they aren't transported right now. So this is where you see that, this is where that filter will affect what you see here. Now, when it comes to a summary gadget, I'm going to go ahead and add a client summary here. I'm going to use that exact same filter. So my red patients with tracking and ETA, I'm going to go ahead and say let's group them by triage category. Actually, let's group them by, let's do encounter location because that's always the fun one. We'll sort it by name, and we're going to use a counter box just because I really like counter boxes. And I'm not going to choose to only show incident mode locations. I'm going to show all locations. And you can see here I've got a number of different patients. Now, when I drill down into one of these patients, you'll notice the columns that we see across the top here in the table that's showing me the patients that meet that criteria are the same columns that were selected. So this again is based on that filter that I created. So the results that we're going to see in here, this is going to be all of my red patients. So this is going to be based on that filter But then beyond that, even when we drill down, the columns that you see in here are going to be based upon what columns are included in the filter that this gadget is based upon. So like I said, filters are really great. You use them to search for things. Everything looks, fine and dandy, but they have more functionality than that. They also let you customize what's seen, in essence, at a glance view, whether you're looking at, at your detail, or you're looking and drilling down into one of your fields here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add another gadget, and I'm going to go ahead and add a client list, and I'm just going to use that standard all clients. And I'm going to go ahead and apply it. And you can see that one just gives us that standard age, gender, provider, and tracking summary. Now, if I come back in here and I say, you know what, I actually want to base this on a new filter, I can go ahead and hit new, and you'll notice it gives me the opportunity to create a new filter. And I'll come in here and I'm going to say, I want it to actually search by, let's do a destination, location, type of facility. So I want to know everybody who's en route to a hospital. So for your EMS folks, they probably are going to want two gadgets, one that shows both incident sites and one that shows facilities, or maybe they want to see both in one. That's obviously an option, but I'm going to go ahead and stick with facility here. I'm going to hit search, and you'll see again it gives me that basic information. I'm going to say, you know what, I really want to see that tracking number in here, and I also want to know what incident they're in. Although if I think about it, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to filter my list by incidents anyway. I'm not going to worry about that. I'll take that one back off. But we know they're all being transported, so I'm going to go ahead and add that ETA in. If I can do that, I'm going to go ahead and say, yep, this is what I want, but I want the tracking number to be at the front, and then I want to know the ETA, and then I want to know the rest of it. So we'll do a provider evaluation, and then we'll do the age, the gender, and then the tracking summary, because we know they're all transporting, and we'll be able to look and see where they're transporting to if we need to see more detail. I can go ahead and let's refine this search. Looks like I'm doing that. Okay. So we're going to do just the destination type of facility, and I'm going to go ahead and hit save, and I'm going to call this en route to a provider facility, just because chances are good somebody's already created one in here that's called en route to a hospital. And I'm not going to share it with anybody. I'm going to call it good to go, and I'm going to go ahead and hit save. So now I have this filter called en route to provider facility, and it's just looking for folks that are on their way to a provider facility. If I come in here now, you can see it automatically changed that filter to en route to a provider facility. I can go ahead and apply it, and you'll see that did pull out that additional person that was at Cincinnati Children's. You'll notice as soon as I pull up one of these patients, if they get received, so I'll go ahead and receive this person in Mercy Metro. It'll just take a moment here. You'll notice they're going to drop off. So this is automatically going to change based on as patients, are changed to transporting to a provider facility, and as people are received, they'll automatically drop off. So this is always going to be your list of folks that are en route to a hospital. Now we can do the same thing. We'll add another gadget. We can add a client summary. Drag it up over here, and we're going to go ahead and I'm going to choose that en route to a provider facility, and we'll group them by triage category, which makes absolutely no sense, but it allows me to do it anyway. And I'm going to sort them by severity. And we're going to go ahead and do this one as a bar chart. And I'm going to show my 0 values just because I know I'm going to have some. So you can see here, there's my 4 red patients that we're seeing over here. I can drill down into that, and you'll notice it gives me that exact same result. So I've got that age, gender, provider, tracking status, the ETA, and the tracking number, just like I have over here. Now, let's say I go, you know what, I'd really like to reorder that. Let me come back in here, and I'm going to view that filter. We're going to hit search so that we can see the columns. I'm going to move that tracking number over, and then I'm going to do the ETA, and then we'll do provider eval, and then we'll worry about their age and gender. And I'm going to go ahead and save that change. And then I'm going to close out, and you'll notice after I refresh, let me go to another page. Oh, whoops. Let me save my dashboard first. I do like the fact it will remind you if you try to go away and you get that message, it means you've done something and you didn't save it. So you'll notice if we come over here and come back, it refreshes. I could have waited for the refresh to happen. This just makes it happen faster. You'll see now we're looking at tracking number ETA, so all of those columns are in the order that I placed them. If I come over here into red patients and drill down, you'll notice the same thing. We've got those columns in the order that we were looking for them. So that's what you can do. Again, that's, like I said, this focus today has kind of been on filters, creating filters, adding and ordering them, how to order your columns so that they're in the way you want them, updating the filter. So in other words, hey, I need to make changes. I took a look. It's not quite giving me what I want. And then when you create that dashboard, being able to customize your gadgets using those filters. So does anybody have any questions? I think I may have actually done this in a reasonable amount of time for once. So this is, just so you know, this is the link to the pages, and you can get to them through the help as well. For those folks that are interested in all of the vaccination recordings that we did in the vaccination cheat sheets on how you can set things up for vaccination screening, that's where those are at. And then if anybody has any questions or wants to talk about anything EMTrack related, ask away. This is your opportunity.
All right. Well, thanks, Margot. If we've got questions and follow-up to this, we'll answer them over email. One thing that I'd really love is to get some feedback for us. It takes a fair amount of time for Margot and Elaine to put these together. Certainly a big investment on your time as a client to show up to these. So we'd love to see what you find useful, what we could do better, what we could do differently. We're just trying to experiment with a bunch of stuff to see what makes it useful for you. So thank you for joining. Margot, thank you so much for hosting these for us. Let us know if you've got feedback.
Thank you very much for this. This was great.